Hello, my name is Jared Causey, and my presentation is on the topic of physical abuse. This first slide here contains a video about several convicted abusers. They were reflecting on their violent behavior in their past, and so this is it's a 15-minute video, but I'm going to limit it to only 5 minutes because of time. So I hope that this video is enlightening to everyone.
All right, let me have them introduce you to you. So do a brief version, do your name, what you did, and what group number you're on.
John, group number 9, ninth week. Had a little altercation with my wife and grabbed her arm, and that's the physical abuse that I committed to my wife.
My name is Paul. I'm on class 19, and I'm here because I dumped my wife's purse out on top of her, and she called the cops, didn't want to press charges, but the DA picked it up as being a violent crime.
My name is Grant. I violated a restraining order.
My name's Todd.
I'm Mark.
I'm Michael.
I got in front of my wife and I slapped her.
I holded her and pushed the wall.
Caught my wife cheating on me. Punched that guy several times. Hit her a couple times.
A lot of screaming and yelling and pushing and stuff. Police got called.
I got arrested and now I'm here.
We got a lot of stuff to do tonight, so let me just kind of think. So I got 2 progress reports. I got to take care of Robert. We're going to bring Grant into group, and then we've got to do acceptance and encouragement. Okay, so let's bring Robert in. So Robert, introduce yourself to them and tell them what you did to get yourself here.
My name's Robert. We had just had one of my youngest sons. We were both working a lot, me and my wife. You know, we started arguing, and I got mad, and I threw the remote, our TV remote, and it busted, and the batteries flew out and hit her on the arm. She had a bruise on her arm. You know, I mean, I always grew up knowing that, you know, you don't hit women. You don't. I always grew up that way, you know, and I'm not perfect, you know. Obviously, I'm here. I take.
Even if you weren't here, you wouldn't be perfect.
Yeah, and I take responsibility, but at the same time, I mean, this is not my first class.
This has happened before?
I've had multiple classes. This is actually my 3rd class. I mean, I'm trying to, you know, change. I mean, sometimes I don't think, I just react. And
Can I ask you some hard questions?
Yeah, you can ask me anything you want.
What do you think about this being your 3rd time in group?
First thing that comes to my mind is ridiculous, because I should have learned from the first time. I didn't, apparently, and it's confusing for me too as well, because I'm just like, man, like why can't you get it? I can get other things, but I couldn't, you know, I couldn't get that. I mean, I grew up in a hostile home, you know what I mean? I used to get hit, abused. That doesn't work. It doesn't work, because in reality, for me, all it did was piss me off more. All it did was put more fuel and more fire in my heart. And
What kept the cycle going?
it completely kept the cycle going. And as it kept going, I kept picking up bits and pieces of different things. And by the time I got to my relationship, I got this whole cluster of stuff that I'm thinking, well, how is that even here? And I got to deal with it.
And the biggest pull that I can think of that would make you want to participate in all this is, aren't you tired of things going awful? Let that be your motivation. I want something better for myself and my partner. You got lots of work to do.
You know, well, yeah, I got.
Who else has questions
But
for Robert?
I think I have made, you know, a little step towards, you know, doing better. I mean, if I just wouldn't threw the dang remote, I mean, honestly, like, that's what, I mean, I don't, you know, like, I don't get physical anymore, you know, and
Throwing a remote is physical.
yeah, but it wasn't intentional, like, throwing it at her. It was, you know,
Intentions are irrelevant.
I know, but
So one of the things,
but I have gotten better, though. That I know.
okay, I'll give you that. But what I want you to try to avoid is minimizing it. If you make it smaller in your mind, well, I only threw the remote, and I didn't mean to do it, it makes the violence less important, and then you're less likely to use your tools to stop. If you realize what I did was wrong, even if it was verbal, even if I didn't mean to do it, it was wrong. I need to use my tools every day, all day. This can never happen again. Do you see the difference?
Yeah, a big difference.
All right, so we'll finish the accepting. Okay, go. All right, let's get started.
All right, so some reflections about the video. Notice that Robert in the video, he basically said that, you know, what he's doing, what he did when he threw the remote at his wife is essentially not that big of a deal. And basically that shows that he's minimizing what he's done. He's not truly sorry. He's not truly repentant for what he's done. And that's typically what unrepentant abusers will do. When they're not truly repentant of that sin, they will try to minimize that physical abuse they caused. Just something to be aware of. Another reflection about the video, the individual in the video, Robert, he was physically abused as a child. And he said that played a part in his life as he grew up. I mean, he continued to, as he was growing up, he eventually began physically abusing other people. And so obviously there might be a correlation there, I think. That's not necessarily the case always, but we do need to understand that children that have been abused, they're more prone to that type of activity in the future when they're older. That does not mean they're doomed to repeat the sins of their abusers. It just means that youth pastors and leaders, once they come across students like this, they need to shepherd them in a particular way. And then lastly, physical abuse, it does not only occur with the inclusion of punches and hits thrown. Any harm that is caused physically is considered to be an example of physical abuse. So the individual, Robert, he basically acted like throwing a remote at someone is not a big deal, but it can be very harmful. And obviously that's not as serious as someone punching and hitting more viciously at someone. That I know that the severity is different there, but it's still serious. It's still physical abuse and needs to be obviously prosecuted, and also needs to be condemned. So some statistics related to child physical abuse. Nearly 700,000 children are abused in the U.S. each year. A very scary statistic there, but also even more scary, I think, is this next stat here. It says children in the first year of their life had the highest rate of victimization of 2.7% of all children that age. And this could be because what they consider child abuse here is neglect or abandonment. So a lot of children are abandoned or neglected in their first year of them being alive. So that's very sad, and that's abuse. That's physical abuse for sure. But that's probably the reason why that statistic it is the way it is. In 2018, an estimated 1,770 children died from abuse and neglect in the United States. A very scary statistic, and something Christians should be aware of and concerned about. In substantiated child abuse cases, 78% of children were victimized by a parent. This isn't very surprising, but I think it still is very frightening, this stat. We need to realize that when abuse takes place, it's more likely going to come from the parent based on this statistic. And then lastly, 3 out of 5, or nearly 61% of victims were neglected only. More than 10% were physically abused only. And 7% were sexually abused only. So, yet the statistics indicate a more complex problem where children experience multiple forms of abuse. In 2018, more than 15% of kids were polyvictimized. That's a new word for me. It means that someone has received or experienced 2 or more forms of abuse. That's very scary. So some information about physical abuse. So the definition of physical abuse is when someone physically hurts or harms a person intentionally. It includes examples such as hitting with hands or objects, slapping, punching, kicking, shaking, etc. If a person is regularly showing signs of physical abuse, such as bruising, this obviously should be a red flag for the observer. Just because a person has a bruise, or a student has a bruise at one point, doesn't mean that physical abuse is taking place. But if there is a clear pattern happening that you can see, this should leave the observer suspicious at the least. So, what should you do if child physical abuse is suspected? The first thing you should do is listen carefully to what they're saying. Have that conversation with them. Listen carefully and try to hear what they're saying and be very careful in that conversation as you're listening. Let them know they've done the right thing by telling you. Let them know that you affirm them and who they are and what they've experienced, and that you will, continue to be with them by their side, and know that that they have someone in their corner, essentially. Also tell them it's not their fault. A lot of these children that experience this abuse, they assume that they're guilty, maybe. Tell them it's not their fault. Tell them that they did not do this. They're not guilty of acting out in this way, that it was the physical abuser that committed these atrocities. Say you'll take them seriously. Let them know that you're listening carefully and intently, and that everything they're saying is being taken very seriously. Don't confront the alleged abuser. Even if it's someone that you know, if it's a pastor or a deacon, anyone, don't confront that person. They're potentially dangerous and could cause harm to you. Go straight to the police. Go report to the proper authorities what has happened, and also explain what you'll do next to this person that is letting you know that someone's physically abusing them. Explain to them that this is what you're going to do clearly, so that they're not surprised at what happens next, and that they don't lose trust. That trust isn't broken there. So that is what you should do if child physical abuse is suspected. It's very important to follow those steps. So this has been my presentation on the topic of physical abuse. Have a great week. God bless.